When I was writing and researching for the novel Spinsterella, I got a lot of black people trying to tell me what goth was, and a lot of the things that they were saying about goth pretty much were not true. And I find myself, even to today, still trying to explain to people what goth is. And a lot of people, they in the black community, they have no understanding what this subculture is about, or the origins of it, or the history of it. I've had some people say that goth relates to the Ostrogoths of the of ancient times, and that has nothing to do with the goth subculture at all. The roots of the goth subculture come out of the late 1970s punk culture from the UK. That is where the core root of the modern day goth subculture comes from. And it's a music based subculture based on bands from the late 70s and the 80s, such as your Susie and the Banshees, your Depeche Mode, and other bands like The Cure, um, and later ones VNV Nation and bands like that, and other ones such as Christian Death and bands like that. And that's where the roots of the whole goth subculture comes from. It comes a music-based subculture, and with the music came, a dark aesthetic and a dark style. And a lot of people, that's where that comes from. And a lot of black people, they think again that the goth subculture comes from some sort of evil thing or some sort of satanic thing, and that it has something to do with Satan. And this is not true at all either. Goth has nothing to do with Satanism. It has nothing to do with any religion at all. Goth is basically a subculture that revolves around music and, in some ways, fashion. Because goth fashion is unique, but it's all part of it's rooted from the music. And a lot of black people, they really don't understand the subculture, or the roots of it, or the history of it, and they think that again, that it comes from Satan, when that's not true at all. It has no basis with any religion. It's not affiliated with any religion. I have studied pictures and researched and found goths who are Christians, goths who are Muslims, goths who are Jewish, goths who are agnostic, and all people of all races, all ethnicities, all religions enjoy this subculture and the darker, side of life. And when it comes down, to African Americans, there are African Americans in the goth subculture, but in most cases, most people don't want to talk about those African Americans because they don't fit a narrative for the mainstream media. See, the mainstream media likes to hear a certain type of story regarding African Americans. They like to hear about, you know, African Americans who play basketball and drink grape soda and listen to rap music. That's the kind of black person they feel really comfortable about, having a dialogue about. If the hip hopping, bebopping, basketball playing black person makes a lot of people in the rest of the world feel comfortable because it fits a narrative that people like hearing about African Americans. They don't like the idea of hearing that black people participate in other alternative lifestyles like the goth subculture. And if people start hearing about those type of subcultures, what I find is, especially in places like the black community, it makes a lot of black people very uncomfortable because they're used to people fitting one narrative and one voice. And they like the idea, a lot of African Americans like the idea of this concept of monolithic thought. So they want everybody to pretty much look the same, sound the same, act the same, and think the same, and tell the exact same story of some you know downtrodden Negro from the streets, and that makes people feel comfortable when they hear that story. When they hear about African Americans participating in alternative lifestyles like the goth subculture, that's something that takes people out of their element and it makes them very uncomfortable. Now, I'm comfortable with people from the subculture. It's not a problem for me because I see them as just people. And, you know, I look at the goth subculture as just like any other, like a hip hop subculture, like people who like hip hop or people who like comics, or people who like wrestling. It's a lifestyle that people enjoy, and things that they like to do, and it's something that they feel comfortable about. And a lot of people would look at that, and then in the black community, they go, if it's not fitting into a box, there must be something wrong with that person. And I've heard people, say that, oh, a person who has decided to be goth is some cases an outcast in the black community, and that's not the case at all. The reasons why people choose to be goth vary from person to person. Some people, come into the subculture at a young age, and they stay until sometimes until the day of they die. And some people come in when they're teenagers and they leave in their 20s or their 30s. It depends on the person and what they feel comfortable with, and what they feel comfortable about expressing. And and what I find is that it varies from person to person. Every black person who is a goth has their own story about how they came into the subculture, how they feel what made them want to be a part of it, what they liked about it, and what type of things they got into. Some people got into it for the fashion, some people got into it for the music, and they don't. Some people just got into it because they live on the dark side of life and they are comfortable with the dark side of life. And what I find, with the African American goth subculture is it's a just as unique as any other subculture in the black community. But this is the one that no one wants to talk about, nobody wants to play up, and nobody wants to discuss in the media, again, because it does not fit the narrative that most people have regarding African Americans. When it comes down to African Americans, again, they want to just tell that one story of guys in the street. But as a publisher, I wanted to talk about an African American in the goth subculture, because I've been aware of the goth subculture since I was about 14, 15 years old. I've been aware of things that went on in it, and I've been aware of that darker side of life. I practically live on it in many cases, even though I don't dress that style, but I pretty much live on the dark side quite a for the most part. So I can identify and relate, to a lot of what goes on in it. And I've watched a lot of the media that a lot of goths have watched. Watch a lot of horror movies when I was a kid. Still watch them. Still watch a lot of Tim Burton films. I really enjoy his, artistic style cinematically, and I like his dark aesthetics in his films and his, visuals. Um, Listened to a lot of the music when I was a kid, and still, went and listened to a lot of the music again when I was doing the research for the Spinsterella novel, and I got reacquainted with it. So, and I also got reacquainted with quite a bit of the styles and the fashion as well when I was doing research, for the novel. I would look at a lot of different people's blogs, different people's videos, and I reconnected with quite a bit of it, and it was like a great experience. I really enjoyed putting this novel together, and putting this story together, because I really wanted people to learn a bit more about the goth subculture, learn a bit more about the people, learn a bit more and come to a broader understanding of what African American is, because a lot of people in the African American community, again, only see black through one lens, or I call it the white lens, and they don't see that there are many shades and textures to the black experience, and being goth is another shade and texture to being black, and it's a story that we need to tell more about these other parts of African American culture and other parts of the African American experience, so that people can get a broader understanding of what a black identity is, and stop letting mainstream media tell us what black is. We should be trying to define that for ourselves, and exploring those other parts of our own culture and our own history and our own experiences. And I feel that if more African Americans, start talking about the goth subculture, and talking about the positives of it, and talking about, the goth experience, it's going to enrich everybody's life in the African American community, because you're going to get a broader picture of what it means to be black, and you won't have to sit there and think, I have to define myself by this one term or this one standard that mainstream media says that has to be black. Black can be whatever you want it to be, and you don't have to live, by somebody else's terms and somebody else's styles. You can, create and do what you want, and that's part of what's great about the goth subculture is that there is no one true definition of what goth is. It's again, it varies from person to person, and everybody does what they feel comfortable with regarding, goth style, goth fashion, whatever music they want to listen to. Some people like to listen to, standard hip hop in addition to the goth band. Some other people, like to watch, other movies outside of, these dark movies or Tim Burton movies. And it depends on what you want to choose. And then the whole thing is that you get this great freedom of choice, in the subculture, and that's why a lot of people come into it because they don't feel confined to one set of rules or one set of standards. They can, create their own style and things. Um, I really want to get more black people talking about the goth subculture. I really want them to start, you know, learning a bit more about it. And that was one of the main reasons why I wrote, the Spinsterella novel. And I really want people, to see goths as people and to, see them as nice, friendly people. Because I look at many of the YouTube videos from goths, and they're some of the nicest people I have ever seen, and some of the nicest people I've ever had the chance to interact with. And I wish people would get to know the goths and the goth subculture and see how great the people are in it, and learn a bit more about it. That's all I have to say for this video. You can pick up the novel Spinsterella on Amazon in paperback and on Kindle Unlimited. And if you have Amazon Prime, you can pick it up for free. Again, that's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.